Thank you everyone for calling in and for joining us today for the presentation on the Fern Ridge Lake Master Plan. My name is Wendy Jones. I'm a biologist with the Portland District Office. So these instructions are only if your microphone's not working on your computer. We are going to have a question and answer period at the end. If you have a working microphone, that's fine. You don't need to follow this. This is only if you cannot use a microphone, then you can use an audio only, or you can connect your Teams audio through a phone. So for those of you that are new to the Teams platform, I'm just going to cover a few of the basics with the mute and how to participate in some of the interactive pieces of this presentation. So note that these buttons, they may be on the top or the bottom of your screen. They could also be on a panel on the right-hand side. It just depends on if you're on a computer or on a phone, and if you're in a web browser or an app. So just keep that in mind. There is a way to use closed captioning if you would like to do that. There is so you're going to have a list of icons. Everyone is muted right now. We will take people off of mute when we go into the question and answer period. We're also asking people to keep their cameras off for now just to save the bandwidth. If you need captioning, that's done individually for each person. So there is a series of 3 buttons with the word more underneath it. If you click on that, that's what's highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the screen here. You can go into the drop-down for language and speech and then turn on the live captions, and it'll do a live transcription during the meeting. We are recording this and we'll post it online, and a transcription will be available for that recording as well. The 2 other buttons that I'd like to point out, highlighted in blue here, is the chat feature. We'll be monitoring the chat during the presentation, so if you have questions or concerns, we can try to troubleshoot things for you. And then if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, you can go ahead and add them to the chat box. And then at the end, we'll start with those in the question and answer period. And there's one other button that you may use. It's the raised hand button. If you do click on that, you'll get a little bar underneath there and you'll be assigned a number. And that just shows you where you are in the queue that will call on you next. And then you'll just hit that button again to lower your hand. All right. So before we get, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. Before we get started on the presentation slide, I just want to cover some of the conversation etiquette. So we just want to make sure that we're not interrupting or talking over one another when we do the question and answer period. We know that you're here because you support the stewardship of Fern Ridge Lake, and so we do want to hear everyone's input. We're going to let others get a chance to ask their questions without judgment and just assume positive intent with what people are contributing today. And we will answer your questions at the end of this presentation. So for today's meeting, we're going to provide you an opportunity to hear about the Fern Ridge Lake master planning process and give you an opportunity to discuss any of the issues that are related to recreation or other things that are important to you. The agenda will consist of an overview of the Willamette Valley project and the resources that are at Fern Ridge, and then some of the details of how a master plan revision works. And we will follow that with an opportunity to understand how to participate and to ask questions and learn more information. So thank you for coming today. For introductions, we have several members of the Army Corps of Engineers that are on the call today. They're coming from 3 different offices. And then we also have our external partners with Lane County Parks and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, who manage a number of the recreation sites at the lake. So I'm going to start this by getting to know a little bit about who we have on the call today. So I have a couple of questions, and this will be your opportunity to learn how to use the chat feature and the raise hand feature. So the first question I have for all of you, who fishes on these lakes or boats on Fern Ridge Lake? And so if you fish or boat here, you can go ahead and raise your hand. If you want to use the chat feature, you can indicate the type of boating you like to do or the type of fishing you like to do. Oh, that's great. I'm seeing the little hands pop up. So this is what we'll use during the question and answer period, and you see how it assigns numbers, so that is very helpful to us. All right, so if you had your hand raised, you can click the button again and it'll lower your hand, and then I'll ask the next question. All right, great. So the next question, how many of you have camped here or walked on one of the trails? And again, you can use that raise hand feature, or if you want to put in the chat box maybe a favorite place that you enjoy. Okay, great. That's great. All right, thank you so much. And then if you want, you can lower your hand again. You do that same button to raise your hand. So as a reminder, we're going to keep the chat open during the presentation. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in that chat box. All right, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so why are we here today? So prior to revising the master plan for Fern Ridge Lake, the Corps is interested in receiving feedback from the public on their experiences here. And we really value public engagement, and these scoping meetings help provide information and identify any data gaps. And it allows us a space to share ideas and receive honest feedback about your concerns and your priorities for how we're managing the lake. And we can build from today for long-term collaboration and make sure that we welcome in everyone that wants to participate in the revision process. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dustin Bankston for the Willamette Valley Project overview.
Thank you, Wendy. And hello, everyone. Thanks for making time today in the middle of the day to help us kick this off. I'm Dustin Bankston. I'm the Operations Project Manager for the Willamette Valley and the Rogue Basin projects in Southern Oregon. I have been in the Willamette Valley now for a little over 33 years. And in that time, have spent a bulk of what I do engaged with folks like yourself, trying to understand how we can provide the best balance of benefits from these projects, the most safety, the most reliable operation, the best access for public use. For a big chunk of my career, that's been what I've done, and it's a great job. And so I'm very excited that we are starting this idea of visioning where the Willamette's going to be 30 plus years from now. And we'll talk more about the master planning process and context. But from that perspective, much has changed in the time that I've been here. And so it's timely for us to start looking at the system as a whole that we operate and how we can best achieve the balance of benefits and public expectations going into the future. I always provide this kind of basic overview so that folks have a context of what the Willamette Valley Project is. And when we refer to the Willamette Valley Project, it is those 13 dams in the Willamette system, multi-purpose dams that were constructed back in the late 30s, early 40s, the last one being constructed and operational in 1969. And then in addition to the dams themselves, there were hatcheries and Willamette bank protection works within the system that are also considered part of the Willamette project. And while these master plans will focus most specifically, and this one in particular, on the Long Tom subbasin, we certainly operate these dams as a system. So as we look at master plans and other documents that guide our operations, we are looking at this balance of operations as a whole, so that we can achieve, again, that best balance of benefits through these sometimes competing authorized purposes. And many of them you're familiar with. Flood risk management is our primary purpose. It drives everything we do, and any decisions we make are in the context of making sure that changes do not increase risks to folks downstream. These projects have been tremendously beneficial for development in the Willamette and protection of people and property, going back to something as recent as 2019, where in a 7-day span, we prevented nearly $2 billion of damages in that one storm event. And those types of large events and non-routine events continue to pop up for us that we have to manage through. Outside of that flood risk management mission, there are a number of things that we have authorization to do and infrastructure to do it with at our projects. We produce hydropower at 8 of our facilities. There's a 9th hydropower facility that's managed by a private entity on Dorena Reservoir. We have a navigation authority on the books, and part of the original concept for the Willamette was that commercial navigation within the Willamette would become necessary, and a maintained channel to support that, along with flow augmentation, would be a piece of it. And of course, commercial navigation on the Willamette did not quite materialize that way. And while that navigation authority remains, for the most part, we use the stored water and augmentation for other benefits, to improve water quality downstream and to improve conditions for fish and wildlife. And so those water quality authorities and fish and wildlife authorities are something that we certainly manage for and are certainly big drivers in decisions we make around the use of stored water. But there are also significant future considerations for water supply, municipal and industrial use, irrigation. The Bureau of Land Management can issue contracts for stored water within the system, and there are contracts in the Long Tom or at Fern Ridge for some of that stored water. And then we all know that recreation is incredibly important to local communities, and they've faced significant chunks of their economy and their stability around public use and recreation income or economies. So we try to figure out ways, and increasingly as we see new demands on the system or changes in weather, how we can operate our facilities in legal compliance. All of these things are in tension. And so this is one effort, a master plan, a land use plan that helps inform us in how to achieve the best management possible over the long haul. Next slide. So I mentioned that there's a lot of change going on. There are just a lot of actions going on in the Willamette period right now. And so I wanted to take just a minute to try to clarify or distinguish this master planning process from some of these other very visible actions that we've had going on for some time. We are currently working to implement a biological opinion that is specific to listed fish species in the basin. That biological opinion is the result of an update to our environmental impact system for the operation of the entire system, something we had been working on since 2019 and was released as a final in April of 2025. And so that biological opinion and those actions are going to define how we need to operate our system to prevent jeopardy to some listed species. The most visible for most folks are salmon and steelhead in the basin, but there are other species, both fish and also species that are not aquatic. We manage a number of listed species in the basin, plants, animals. And so all of that in context has been going on and has changed our operations in some pretty significant and visible ways for folks. That is not part of this master planning process, but it is something that we're actively working on, including a supplement to that fairly new environmental impact statement, which was required because we had legislation that required telling us to look at removal of hydropower as an authority and what the impacts of removing hydropower would be on the system, as well as some operational fish passage in the North Santiam Basin, a drawdown to help us get fish past our dam. So those two additional elements have been evaluated in a supplemental EIS that we would expect to complete sometime in the spring of this year. So all of that study, that evaluation of the changes in our system, new requirements that we have to operate under, are things that we take into consideration in a master planning process, but it isn't necessarily the focus of master planning in particular. There are other things that we're working on to try to provide both visibility and information to people on the condition of our dams and where they are in relation to floodplains and risk downstream. I would encourage anybody to Google the National Inventory of Dams and find in Oregon the reservoirs that you use most often. Fern Ridge is probably one of those. And in that National Inventory of Dams, you will find a lot of information on the condition of our facilities, emergency action plans, kind of where you sit in context. But that's a broad effort nationally to try to help provide information, make folks aware of risks and how to manage those. And then in the context of risks, we are constantly working through evaluation in the condition of our dams. All of our dams for the most part, are what are considered high hazard dams, not because of their condition, but because of what they protect downstream. And so as a part of that rigorous dam safety program, we work through some very detailed analysis. And in this part of the country, seismic evaluation is of significant concern. And so a number of our dams are being evaluated around seismic risks and vulnerabilities. And as those evaluations evolve and we learn more about the potential impacts to our facilities from earthquakes and other natural factors here in the Northwest, we start to take steps to either correct those or manage that risk until we know more. And so you will hear coming up soon some discussion around Hills Creek and some additional risk reduction measures that we're taking in the interim while we continue to study seismic vulnerabilities and the infrastructure that we have at Hills Creek. And then closer to home or closer to the Long Tom, you may have heard the issues around the removal of Monroe Dam and that effort to modify that stretch of the river and improve some conditions for current and future expectations is actively underway, and you'll start to see things start to move hopefully here in the next year or so. But that's been a long and kind of concerted effort with the City of Monroe and other partners to improve conditions in that stretch of the Long Tom. And since we're on the subject of the Long Tom, I know we will touch on this later, but the Long Tom is unique below Fern Ridge Dam. It is a feature of the project, but not something that we will include in the master plan. Our authorities around the Long Tom are very limited to maintaining the modifications that were put in place back in the 40s to help facilitate or convey water more efficiently downstream during flood events. But it doesn't extend to ownership of the land. We have maintenance easements down on the reach of the river below the dam that allow us to do certain maintenance activities, but not the full range of activities that we would do around Fern Ridge where we have fee title to the lands. So again, that will be explained later, and if there are questions around the Long Tom, we can certainly answer them then. Next slide.
Hey, Dustin, I'm going to pause you just for a second here. Mr. Hoffman, can you hear us by chance on the phone? If not, I just want to let you know that this is also being recorded, and we can work through the closed caption issue that you're having, if that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I was not catching the chat there.
No problem. You can go ahead, Dustin. I'll continue to monitor the chat.
So in looking at these long-range plans and kind of a change from where we've been in the past, initially master plans were developed for each of the projects. So every one of our facilities had a master plan. But we know that in practice, we tend to see impacts and demands more geographically. And so we've chosen, both from an efficiency standpoint, to try to have fewer plans to keep current and update on a regular basis, but also to take into account more of a local geographic demand and a broader area of impact to these land use decisions. We've broken our master plans up a little differently. And so we've consolidated by watershed into six, essentially, am I counting right? 6 master plans, that's right. 2 of those, the Coast Fork, which incorporated Cottage Grove and Dorena Lakes, and the South Santiam, that included Foster and Green Peter, have been completed. The Long Tom is unique, and so Fern Ridge Lake will have a standalone master plan, and that's what we're kicking off today. And we're also initiating conversations and scoping around the Middle Fork Willamette, which will include several projects: Hills Creek, Lookout, Dexter, and Fall Creek Lakes. After we complete those and subject to the availability of funds, we will look at the remaining projects in the system, Blue River, Cougar, Detroit, and Big Cliff, to work through this same process in developing a vision for the next 20 to 30 or more years that we can implement over time. So thank you again for your participation today. I am really hoping that, I know this benefits some folks, but I'm hoping to see some folks face-to-face in the meetings and get to meet people that have an interest in Fern Ridge. Look forward to working with you all on this process. And with that, I will transition it back to Wendy to talk about what a master plan is.
Thank you, Dustin. So I'll cover a few slides on what a master plan is, and then Christy will give us a little bit of information on the resources that are at Fern Ridge. So master plans are future planning documents. We're supposed to be looking 20 to 25 years out, and they really talk about the current recreation, any future recreation developments, and then how we manage and protect the habitat and the wildlife and any of the other natural and cultural resources. So the master plan is supposed to establish a vision for future management and then make sure we responsibly steward the land. And I do need to explain the word project, the way that we use it. It can sound like jargon the way that the Army Corps uses it, but it does mean the dam, the reservoir, and all the land that's associated and surrounding the area that the Army Corps manages. And it comes from when Congress initially authorizes the dam construction project. We will sometimes interchangeably use the word project and reservoir and lake, and it is meant to include all of the land the Army Corps manages, whether it's water or land. So a master plan is going to describe the resources and then set goals to manage those resources. So you can see a list on the screen of the types of resources that we're most interested in hearing about from you. And then we also plan to integrate a NEPA document into the master plan. So that will look at any potential changes that we want to make and how that would impact the resources that are at the lake. And then it lets us look at the various laws and executive orders and make sure that we're in compliance with them. So the previous master plan is from 1988 at Fern Ridge, and showing on the screen right now is those former management units with a land classification type. And so essentially it's a bit like a zoning plan for the managed area. So each unit will have a land classification based on its primary use. It can have additional uses, but we have to choose one primary use for each area. So shown on the map here, the yellow areas can be operations. You can also have recreation areas. Those are shown in brown and orange on the map. You can have more natural areas as either vegetation or wildlife, and those are shown in green. There are some smaller areas shown on the map as well. The purple areas are an environmentally sensitive area, and then we also show easements on a map. And then when it comes to the water, the majority of the lake remains open recreation, but you'll also have some smaller areas that could be a no-wake zone, a restricted boating zone, or a fish and wildlife sanctuary. So when we update the master plan and put a proposal back out for review, we will reclassify some of these areas based on the changed conditions or changed land use. So what is not in a master plan? It's important to note what Dustin was talking about earlier. The master plans are not directing the dam operation, so it is not going to go into a lot of detail about the lake elevations or the downstream flows, any of the water quality parameters, or the fish passage requirements. That operations and maintenance EIS and the supplemental EIS will have a lot more detail about those aspects. And while they are separate planning documents, we do understand that they are related. And so the master plan is going to respond to and react to all the dam operations. So this is more pronounced at the other Willamette Valley reservoirs where the deep drawdowns are in place to pass the juvenile fish. At Fern Ridge, it's more of a balance between the downstream irrigation use on the Long Tom River while trying to keep the lake full in the summer for recreation purposes. But it is important overall that we remain adaptable and we work with the state and with Lane County and other partners to allow for multiple types of recreation opportunities, including those that are not as dependent on the lake levels. Next slide, please. So master plans need to be updated periodically so that they remain relevant. These plans are now almost 40 years old, and that's consistent with many of the plans in the Willamette Valley. So the land use changes, they can either be on the Army Corps land or on surrounding lands, such as widening highways or changing city boundaries. I'll cover some of the environmental conditions on the next slide. And then changes in regulations can be new federal mandates or changes in endangered species status that regulate how we manage the areas. And then as far as recreational changes, across the U.S., we're seeing larger RVs, larger boats, and more paddle sport use. So for environmental conditions, quite a bit has changed since 1988. We're seeing more drought conditions, and that can lead to both lower summer water levels and also an increased risk for wildfires. And then those rain and snow events can be more severe or come in at later months. So when that comes to a master plan, as you think about future lake conditions that may be lower than normal, that can change the vegetation that's either growing along the shorelines or out into the lake bed. So we'd like to hear from you on your thoughts on how best to manage those areas. We also have a better understanding of cultural resources. Sorry, can you go back? Yeah, thanks. So we have a better understanding of cultural resources and are partnering with the tribes to better understand how to implement our trust responsibilities. And then not only are there changes with the fish passage and fish requirements, but there's a number of other species that we manage at Fern Ridge. The northwestern pond turtles are proposed for federal listing. And then we've done a lot of recovery actions in the prairies. So the Fender's blue butterfly and the Kincaid's lupin have been downlisted to a threatened species now, and the Bradshaw's limatium is considered recovered and has come off the endangered species list.
Wendy, real quick, there's a chat question. Is the current master plan available online?
So unfortunately, it's not online. There is, Michelle can post in the chat the email address for the, we have a general email box to contact us for comments, but you can also send a message to that, and that way you don't have to put your email into this chat since this is being recorded. But you can email us directly, and we can transfer the file to you so you can see the existing PDF document. It's too large probably to email, so we have a way to get it to you, but it's not posted online right now. We do have a few hard copies of the document as well, so if you live near the Fern Ridge project office or the Cottage Grove office, we can make an appointment for you to come in and see the document in person as well. All right, next slide, please. So as far as the revision process, this meeting today is just the start of that revision process. This is your first chance to talk to us about what you like, what you don't like, areas that need improvement, and what future conditions can be possible. And we really encourage you to talk to your friends about this to get as many people involved as possible so we can hear from all the possible interests. In about a year, we'll provide a document back to you with maps and a lot of information, and that'll be available for your edits and comments. So we're currently in the scoping phase, and this is where we're asking for initial input from you, from the general public, from other agencies and organizations. In our second phase, the draft phase, we will use all that information you provide along with our old master plan and then newer documents and newer data, and we will write a draft master plan and draft environmental assessment. We will announce public meetings again, and we'll have that document posted online for you to review, and we'll have another comment period. And then that final phase is when we take all of that information and all of your comments, and we revise that draft into a final. And then that plan is published after we get formal approval from the Portland District Commander. So I really want to encourage you to participate today so our draft master plan can be as good as possible. And I'm going to turn it over now to Christy Johnson, and she is going to describe some of the resources at the lake.
Unmuted.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
All right, so now that Wendy's explained to you about the master plan process, I would like to provide some background on the existing resources at Fern Ridge Lake, including recreational, environmental, and cultural resources. And I'm going to be describing how these resources are currently managed, which may help you provide us feedback on how you'd like to see these resources managed in the future. So this is a map of Fern Ridge Lake that shows all the recreation areas. I know it's kind of small, so I'm going to go over some information about the recreation areas. So as probably most of you know, Fern Ridge Lake is a popular destination for a variety of recreational activities, including fishing, boating, water skiing, swimming, camping, picnicking, hunting, and bird watching. And in 2024, about 650,000 people visited Fern Ridge Lake. That's just in 1 year. Now, keep in mind the recreation areas are managed by several different agencies, but we all have the same goal of providing safe and enjoyable recreation opportunities for the public. The Corps manages just 3 of the parks around the lake, which include Kirk, Jeans, and Shoreline Parks. Lane County manages the bigger parks at the lake, including the campground, 3 boat ramps, and 2 marinas. And then the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife manages several parking lots around the lake that provide access to the Fern Ridge Wildlife Area. There are also some private entities, such as the Eugene Yacht Club, and I saw that some of you folks are members of the club are on the call today. And those private entities have a lease agreement to have recreation facilities on Corps land. And in addition, there are many private landowners around the lake that have shoreline permits with the Corps of Engineers to have a private dock in the lake and or a private trail from their home to the lake. One other thing I want to mention is that the recreation areas, the Corps parks, are managed by Corps park rangers that are stationed at Cottage Grove Lake. So all the park rangers are stationed there, or all the park rangers that manage recreation are stationed there for managing parks throughout the Willamette Valley at all 13 reservoirs. So if you have questions about parks, call the Cottage Grove Ranger office, which is where I work. So next I want to talk about environmental stewardship. So the upland prairies and extensive wetlands at Fern Ridge provide unique habitats for a great variety of plants and animals. The Corps and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife cooperatively manage the land and water throughout the area to develop and maintain suitable habitat for many species of waterfowl, fish, upland game, and non-game wildlife. Critical habitat occurs within the Fern Ridge Lake area for rare species such as the Fender's blue butterfly, Kincaid's lupin, and Willamette daisy. In addition to managing native species, we use land management strategies that emphasize prevention, containment, or eradication of invasive species, as well as early detection and treatment of new invaders. And since the Corps land around the lake is mostly bordered by private land, the park rangers inspect boundaries periodically to protect public land from trespass and encroachment. And if you live near Fern Ridge Lake, you might have recently seen rangers walking the boundaries in the last couple months, and they're just looking to make sure, they're looking for boundary monuments and just making sure everything looks like it should. Cultural resource stewardship is an equal and integral part of all resource management at Corps reservoirs. For the purpose of master plans, the term cultural resources, it's a broad term that typically includes historic and pre-contact archaeological sites and artifacts. It also includes burials and cemeteries, significant built structures such as bridges and even the dams, as well as places and resources that are traditionally significant to the tribes. For example, you see the field of camas there. That could be significant to a tribe because it has provided traditional food for Native people for many generations. The Corps surveys and monitors cultural and historic resources with a small team of archaeologists and academic partners. Park rangers and law enforcement partners assist in protecting cultural and historic resources by educating people not to collect any resources from Corps land and enforcing protection laws when needed. The Long Tom River Channel is kind of a unique resource here in the Willamette Valley. So you may not know that the Long Tom River downstream of Fern Ridge Dam was actually modified by the Corps significantly in the 1940s and 50s to transport water from the dam to the main stem Willamette River. And this effort was called a Channel Rectification Project. It resulted in shortening the river's length, constructing berms along both riverbanks, and adding structures in the river to slow the velocity of the water as it moved downstream. So in order to construct and maintain this project, the lower Long Tom River Channel, the Corps acquired 776 acres of easements along private property. And so this is different from when the Corps acquired fee title to private land to build the dam and the reservoir. So in the master plan, we are going to include the easements along the Long Tom River on the maps, but because it is not fee-owned land by the Corps, it's not going to be assigned a land classification in the master plan. If you have any questions about the projects, to remove the Monroe Dam or any other habitat restoration efforts, Wendy Jones is actually involved in that, and she could answer those types of questions. And so Wendy is now going to wrap up the rest of the presentation.
All right, thank you for that, Christy, and thank you to everyone for listening. Now we're going to switch things around to hear from you. So we have several ways we'd like to invite you to participate in this master planning process. You can visit the website. There's a QR code on the screen that will take you to that website, and I believe Michelle will also be posting in the chat the website and the email address, so you can contact us as well. A recording of this presentation will be posted online shortly. So if someone couldn't make it today, you can share that information with them. And then any comments that you have, they can be submitted through email, they can be through regular mail. And then also we will be doing a meeting this Saturday in Veneta at the Community Center at 9 a.m. So if other people want to attend, or if you're on now and you'd like to attend in person, that's fine. It will be the same presentation, but we will have some maps up and we'll be able to have one-on-one conversations with people. If you don't get your questions answered today, you're welcome to attend that as well. We do ask that all comments be submitted by February 23rd for this scoping period. And then in addition, in late 2026, we will have a draft document that will be available for public review and for a comment period. And we will again send out notifications and hold public meetings for that. All right, next slide. So thank you again. We greatly appreciate your time attending today. Your participation is very helpful to the process. We're going to leave this slide up for now that has the website and the email address and that QR code again. And we can switch to asking questions. So I will make sure everyone is taken off of mute so that they will individually be able to unmute themselves. And then Michelle will get us started on the chat. So if there are any questions that are in the chat, we'll start with that. I do see that there are a few people that are phone only. We will circle back to the people that are phone only, and we will make sure that we'll basically call out the last 4 digits of the phone number, allow you to unmute, and so you can ask questions. But we'll get to the ones that are in the chat first.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I saw a hand raised from Max Edelson. Max, if you'd like to either put your question in the chat or go ahead and come off mute, you can ask her on the phone as well.
Yes, hello. It was explained to me by someone that that Fern Ridge was the first significant reservoir in our general watershed, to be built with the purpose of flood mitigation, and that since its creation, there's quite a few additional dams upstream, and I'm just curious, if you guys have answers or where we might be able to get answers about, given that change and the additional flood mitigation capacity, whether or not it would be possible to have more water in the reservoir in the wintertime. And I think related to that, it was explained to me that because of the shape and the way that it really tapers out significantly, that just dropping the first so many inches or feet, it provides a lot of capacity. And the context for the question is, those of us, I'm a member of Eugene Yacht Club, who really enjoy the reservoir for recreation, would love it if there could be a little bit more water in the wintertime.
Thank you for that question. I will start with just a short answer on the overall system, and then maybe Dustin, if you would like to talk about the reservoir operations piece of it. You are correct that Fern Ridge Dam was the first dam that was completed. The Corps was lobbied in the 1930s to start a study of the Willamette to deal with flooding issues, not only locally, but all the way downstream to Salem and Portland. And so as that study progressed, Dustin mentioned that this really started in the 1930s and the last dam was completed in 1969. So a number of areas were surveyed to determine how best to address the flooding issues. Fern Ridge Dam was completed in 1940. But also around that time, Cottage Grove and Dorena Dam were being built as well. So those were the first 3 dams that were put into the system. Other dams like Lookout Point were built in the 1950s, and then the last few dams in the 1960s. As far as the reservoir operations, Dustin, is that something you would want to address quickly on the question on when we fill and how?
And thanks for the question. The question of can the way we operate our system be modified to extend recreation seasons is a pretty common one. And I think one thing that's important for folks to know, and this is outside of the context of a master plan, certainly something a master plan is not designed to define. We have a very specific authority in how we operate. It's called the rule curve or our water control diagram. And it really defines how we manage risk over time. And so the primary reason that we draw that pool down in the winter time is about managing downstream risk. And while we have created additional dams in the system and can manage to some level runoff in the system and mitigate damages downstream, there's also that very localized effect that the long tom had, and as Wendy pointed out. In the early 90s, there was an effort that started with congressional authorization to look at modification of the Fern Ridge rule curve to try to extend or stretch the seasons and say, can we operate differently based on risk and other environmental considerations? And the conclusion of that study, which predates my time on the project, didn't result in a modification of the rule curve, which is not to say that it could not be adjusted over time. It would require a pretty detailed study to evaluate that downstream risk and what holding water in the pool longer or at different times of the year would be. And also what those environmental impacts associated with be. But that would not be what we would do through a master planning process. The master plan process itself is about how do we use the land around the reservoir and how do we facilitate use of the reservoir when we're at that full conservation pool. So that would be, that would be a subject and a way we could address it. We'd have to do a little digging to find the specifics on that effort back in the 90s. But I know that there's frequently that kind of interest. And I think one of the things that we really know about Fern Ridge is that it takes a long time to fill up and it takes a long time to pull down. And then we have that constraint downstream in the long time where we have a fairly constrained amount of flow we can put through there before we start causing impacts downstream to property and residences. So those things would be in tension in that kind of discussion and something that could be brought up if we had the authority and the appropriations to do it, but it is not part of the master plan process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I see several more in the chat, and we'll get to them. I did want to jump real quick to the first question we had right before the presentation. We had a phone number, so I didn't catch the name. I'm sorry about that, but you were asking about guns and hunting regulations. If you'd like to come off mute, and if you have something specific to ask about that. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. If you can hear us and you want to put something in the chat specifically about that, go ahead and do that.
And then I will also mention when we have our Saturday meeting, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife from the Fern Ridge Wildlife Area should be attending and can answer any specific questions you have about hunting around Fern Ridge Lake.
Okay. Next question: Can you help connect the trails between the Fern Ridge Trail and Shoreline Park, and maybe and maybe beyond Orchard Point?
Okay, we lost audio for a second, but we're back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Christy.
Excellent, thank you. So the question was about connecting trails. And so I'm not that familiar with all the trails around Fern Ridge, and I know some of them are informal trails, connecting formal trails, but that's definitely something that we are interested in hearing more about. I'm hoping that at our meeting on Saturday in Veneta, that when we're sitting around a map, people can kind of point out where those connections could happen. And, it's something we could definitely take into consideration. We do have a map here. It's probably, might be kind of hard for you to see on the screen, but on Saturday, we're going to have big printouts of these maps, and we can, get out pens and draw on it and try to figure out where connections can happen. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the recreation areas are managed by different agencies. There's different little patchworks of land, and there's a lot of private land as well in different places. So figuring out how to make that connectivity would probably require a partnership effort among different agencies. And the other thing that I should mention is that the Corps of Engineers does have limited funding for recreation, and we're generally not able to build new recreation facilities. So we don't have funding or authorities for that. So therefore, again, it would require partnership effort and outside funding. But that doesn't mean that we can't consider, put it in the master plan as a potential thing for the future. The next question.
Just confirming you guys can still hear us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I do see a comment in there. It would be great to connect the Fern Ridge path all the way around Fern Ridge across Green Hill Road. So we captured that comment. Another question we have in the chat is, how do you expected future changes in the Eugene urban growth boundary affect the Fern Ridge master plan? There are several large urban reserve areas that are likely extend Eugene city construction closer to Fern Ridge Reservoir in the next 30 to 40 years.
All right, I will answer that one. This is Wendy again. So we don't necessarily know the answer to that right now, but through this master plan revision process, we will be meeting with both the city of Eugene and the city of Veneta. We'll also be working with the town of Elmira, and we'll be working on all sorts of questions on how they're using the adjacent land and how that might impact how the Army Corps land is being managed. We don't have direct input necessarily into how the city is managing within their urban growth boundary, but where those areas touch, we try to coordinate as much as possible. And if any of our answers aren't quite satisfying the questions that you're asking, please write into the chat and let us know more specifically what you need.
All right, the next question is, are there expected to be any changes to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers seaplane operations documentation?
This is Christy, and I'm not aware of any changes to seaplane regulations for the Corps reservoirs.
And we will be, again, with this is a very, the master plan revision, we work with a lot of external stakeholders and partners and entities on this. So Oregon State Marine Board is one group that we will be getting feedback and information from as well.
Okay. Next in the chat, are there coordination plans with Lane County, State of Oregon, and City of Eugene regarding Highway 126 and airport development?
So this is Wendy. Yes, we are coordinating with all of those entities as well as the Coos Bay Railroad, which is parallel to Highway 126. There is the Oregon Department of Transportation is on the call, and they are working on that highway widening project that has been a multi-year effort. And so we will continue that coordination to make sure that anything that we're proposing is not in conflict with what the other agencies are doing. As far as the airport, there are some restrictions because of our proximity to the airport. We have not used them, we have not coordinated with them yet, but we will make sure to add them now based on your comment to our stakeholder list. So thank you for that.
Is there a formal consultation ongoing with the tribe nations about this master plan update?
This is Wendy again. Yes, there is. We did send out nation-to-nation consultation letters to 3 tribes, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation. And so with all of those entities, we're also asking them to be cooperating agencies on this document, where we have meetings with them. We discuss any resource issues and what they would like to see in these plans, and allow them to help draft portions or edit portions of the document before it goes out for public release. So we will be consulting with them throughout this process. And we did that as well with both Foster and Green Peter Master Plan and the Cottage Grove and Dorena Lakes Master Plan.
All right, please take into account that Fern Ridge has been recognized as an important bird area, and then a link has been provided. So thank you for that comment.
Yes, and this is Wendy. Thank you very much for the link. Any types of data, maps, documents, reports, plans, any information you have is very helpful to us, so that we make sure we have links and references to the most current information. There are a number of birds that use the lake for either overwintering, foraging, nesting. And so that may be a consideration in the master plan, where we might want to designate an environmentally sensitive area or some type of seasonal rules around human use and recreation in those areas, so that there are areas reserved. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife also manages waterfowl throughout the areas, and there are some specific areas, especially south of Highway 126, that are more kind of reserved for the bird use as well. So that's great. Anytime people can provide us information like that, it's very helpful.
Okay, I'm trying to take these in order, so forgive me if I'm watching the hands and the chat, but we'll go ahead and I'll return to the chat here in a minute, but I do see that Ken Martinson has a hand raised. Would you like to come off mute and ask a question?
Yes, is there any thought about removal of the silt in Fern Ridge or any of the other lakes? Because it's building up around the docks, irrigation for farmers, everything else.
Dustin, is that one you might want to try to answer related to the flood risk management mission?
So we do monitor the accumulation of sediment in the lake and how it impacts specifically our ability to store water for the flood risk management mission. I will say that there are currently no plans for and no kind of public safety drivers that would require us to do any kind of large scale removal of sediments from Fern Ridge or other dams. There may be over time, more of a driver, and anything that we would do would probably be more centrally focused around the main dam itself and the outlet works that we have there. But in answer to your question, no, there is not any specific plan that I'm aware of to remove sediment from the reservoir, and primarily because it's not impacting that kind of primary purpose of water storage for flood risk management.
You do that one? Okay.
All right. Going back to the chat, we have, are the Army Corps or ODFW, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, willing to consider acquiring additional parcels for conservation and recreation? I think that it's important to plan for both increased use and development close to the lake. For example, subdivision development off of Jeans Road is now adjacent to the southern end of Applegate section of the Fern Ridge Wildlife Area. I am concerned that in the future, the existing meadow, marsh, and prairie areas will become too isolated to be effective to conserve the several rare plants and animal species around the lake.
So this is Wendy. Thank you for that question. I think that is a great example of something to submit as an official comment, so we can track that down internally. We do have a Portland District Real Estate Office that works with us on both acquisition and disposals. And so highlighting areas would be important. I think funding is often an issue on how we are able to acquire. And so the first things we tend to look at are places where we need to access and don't currently have access, where we may need to acquire an easement or some way to cross private property to get to a piece of federal land. But any kind of comments like this are perfect for scoping so that we can try to consider it in our master plan.
Okay, is there a plan to replace the walking bridge at Orchard Point and clean up under the bridge area as well?
Hi, this is Christy. Do you mean Orchard Point Park at the Lane County Orchard Point Park? You might have to unmute. Karen.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, so I actually don't know about that because it's a Lane County park, but I'm hoping that we'll have some Lane County Park representatives at some of our master plan meetings, and we'll definitely bring that up.
I'll get back to the chat as well, but I do see Philip Richardson's hand raised. Philip, would you like to come up on mute?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts on the hiking stuff. I actually am a parks planner with City of Eugene. And I guess I would start by saying you guys are a part of the partnership for Rivers to Ridges, and the vision plan does talk about proposed future trails. I think the city is excited to work with you guys on the connectivity, which some of the people here mentioned. I was interested in one of the slides back here. You had like recreational activities, and I thought noticeably missing from that was like walking or hiking, which is like, you know, for the SCORP, the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, like the #1 thing. So, and that's certainly how I tend to use the areas, is just walking around. So I would encourage you to add that. And I'll stay involved and hope I can make the meeting in Veneta. Not sure I can do that, but appreciate all you guys are doing.
Thank you so much for your input. We look forward to working with you.
All right, there's a follow-up to the urban growth question that we discussed earlier. So my specific concern about extended urban growth is the need to increase robust ecological health within the Army Corps land to manage water flows off of new hardscaping and to benefit wildlife.
That's a great comment to make. This is Wendy again. Thank you for that. So that's exactly the kind of information that is going to be helpful to us when we start looking at the purpose and use of these federal lands in the adjacent area. We need to be aware of what's happening right across the boundary. There is a lot of wetland area within Fern Ridge. There's a lot of sheet flow and a lot of connectivity, both with the Amazon Canal and then all of the other little creeks and tributaries that are coming into the lake. So agreed that that is something important for us to track. We will be working with the city on some of those concerns, and we do see impacts when there is adjacent development that changes any of that wetland flow.
Will you be addressing environmental threats such as the emerald ash borer's potential impact to stands of ash trees in terms of tree health and safety of recreation users?
So I can answer, this is Wendy, I'll answer a little bit of that and then turn it over to Christy for the health and safety of recreational users. So we will have a section in the master plan that talks about invasive species or any kind of threats to native ecosystems. And we can describe, we usually have a list of species that we are tracking. The master plan is, though, an overarching document, so it won't necessarily go into the day-to-day operations of what the staff are doing, and that might be a good one to follow up directly with the Fern Ridge Project Office and the Environmental Stewardship section. As far as any kind of monitoring or working with external, like the Oregon Department of Agriculture or other agencies on managing and addressing that. In terms of hazard trees or safety of recreational users, Christy, is that something you'd like to just discuss briefly?
Sure. So I will say that in the developed recreation areas managed by the Corps of Engineers, we do have a hazard tree monitoring program. And so if there are, dead or dying trees in a designated recreation area, they will be removed for that reason, for hazards. I will say, though, if there is like an area where it's not like a designated trail, it's just somewhere around the lake where people walk, it's not really possible for us to manage all the hazard trees, potential hazard trees around every dead and dying tree around the lake. And so we focus on the recreation areas where we know, people are And if you are aware of a hazard tree that's threatening, a structure or creating a safety issue that where a lot of people are spending a lot of time, it's definitely something we do want to hear about. But I just want to manage, let everybody know it's not possible to manage every single tree around the lake for casual use.
What plans are in place to mitigate shoreline erosion?
This is Wendy. I'll start on this one, and then if one of the other Army Corps staff would like to say anything on this, they can. So this is definitely something that our dam safety office, as well as our water management office, monitor at all 13 lakes. They do occasional surveys to look for erosion in those areas. However, what they're generally looking for is any places where there's a large amount of slumping or landslide potentials or issues where it's going to fill the reservoir and reduce the flood capacity of the lake. Fern Ridge is unique in that it is a very wide, relatively shallow lake. So the shoreline erosion may be impacting recreational access, from the land into the water, but it wouldn't necessarily trigger a dam safety issue. And so we have worked with Lane County Parks on some of the shoreline erosion at Zumwalt Park, where we have done, with a lot of volunteer effort, some willow planting and hay bales and trying to reduce the erosion in that area. I don't know that we're aware of all of the issues around the lake. So in addition to places where there's siltation or sediment buildup or there's erosion, that would be a great thing to let us know the location and some of the issues, and then any possible ideas you have on trying to mitigate for that.
If regulations do not already exist, I would encourage thoughtful regulations that limit or mitigate disruptive uses that may not occur at this time and uses that may not be imagined as of today. For example, powerboat racing, wake surfing, or recreation that intentionally or unintentionally creates a large wake as part of the activity, or other events that by their nature exclude large areas of the lake by others. Of course, defining disruptive will be the challenge.
And this is Christy. I did want to let you know that the Corps of Engineers has a special event permit program. And so when there are large events like powerboat racing or things of that nature, they do need to get a permit from the Oregon State Marine Board and also from the Corps of Engineers. And so we do take into consideration things like noise or creating large wakes, different things like that when we are considering new permits. There are some existing permits with a lot of different events that will probably continue, but definitely with new events, we will take that into consideration.
This question is regarding the boat ramps at Orchard and Richardson. At the toe of the ramps, the lake bed has been deeply eroded to the point where trailers can fall off the end and be damaged. Lane County Parks has said that extending the ramps involves working with the Corps because of soil disruption. Are you aware of this, and can safe, prudent management of the ramps be part of the plan as they involve the lake bed?
Yes, definitely. Taking into consideration improving the boat ramps to, for safety reasons and to improve access will be taken into consideration in the plan. And what is helpful, I actually am aware of those issues, and so is Lane County Parks. However, sending in a written comment will be helpful too. So it would be, documented that you have those concerns.
All right, follow-up question to the hazard trees. Christy, where do we report hazard trees?
I will go ahead and put the phone number of the park ranger office. As I mentioned earlier, the Corps of Engineers park rangers are stationed at Cottage Grove Lake. So you can call that phone number. I'll put it in the chat. And yeah, let us know if there's a hazard tree. Now, if it is in a Lane County managed park, then you would be better off contacting Lane County Parks directly because they manage their own hazard tree issues.
And then if if you need to email because there's attachments or things, you can call the ranger office and they can let you know where to send that. You can also use the email address for this master planning process, and Michelle can put that in the chat again. And then if in the future, if either of those, you can always look for the Army Corps Public Affairs Office. There is a general contact information for any type of question related to the Army Corps of Engineers in the Portland district. And you can always send questions to that general email box, and internally they will get it to the right office to help you answer your question. We do have a few more in the chat. I'm aware that there are 2 people on the phone. So we will try to get to them soon and let them ask questions as well. They might be phone only people.
Okay, we've got two comments. Potential useful natural resource information, the Fern Ridge Wildlife Management Area Management Plan. And there's a link provided for that in the link or in the chat.
Thank you.
And then also the comment, we have seen great success with the Friends of Zumwalt Park volunteer group regarding working on bank stabilization, invasive species documentation and removal, trail building and maintenance, defensible spacing projects, as well as working with other groups to make improvements that have needed independent funding.
And that's great. And we are aware of those. Lane County Parks does keep us in the loop on a lot of the work that they're doing, but they have a lot of great staff and a lot of volunteer coordination. And we definitely value all of the neighbors around Fern Ridge Lake. And we're aware that that group on Jeans Peninsula that are part of the Friends of Zumwalt do a lot of fantastic work out there. So thank you.
Let's go to the phones. I'm not sure who on the phone has a question.
There's a number that ends in 8949. You may have to hit *6 on your phone to come off of mute. And we'll try to work on that in the background as well. And then if you have a question, the number ending in 8949, you can ask it now. Okay. We will try the other phone number. There's another number that ends in 1172. And so if you want to come off mute with *6, you can ask us a question or just say no questions.
No questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No questions.
Okay, we'll go back to the chat. The question posed is the Army Corps of Engineers able to help promote and assist in any Friends group to start up and or support the ones running?
Oh, I think we would be interested in working with Friends groups. I would say, we don't have funding if that is that if you're talking about that in terms of support, we don't have funding. We do have, well, I should say we actually do potentially have opportunities for partnership funding. It's kind of like a grant that we'd have to apply for. So I guess that there is a possibility of that, but we would like to work with Friends groups. I know they do a lot of work in Zumwalt Park. We have our neighboring park, the Corps manages Jeans Park. Potentially there could be some projects in there that we could work with a Friends group on.
And we do have a district partnership office. So that's definitely something, if you have an area that you're interested in, it can be a formal Friends group, or sometimes we work with like a homeowner association group in some individual neighborhoods, like down on Perkins Peninsula. So if you have ideas, let us know, send in those comments and we'll get you to the right person to figure that out.
All right, I don't see anything else in the chat, and I'm not seeing any raised hands on my end here, but if anyone, if I accidentally missed a question in the chat or you have a question on the phone, please feel to come off mute or put something in the chat and we'll address that as well.
We will stay on if anyone has additional questions. Just a reminder that you can submit your feedback by mail or by email. And let us know not only what needs improvement, but what's working well and you want to see continue. And remember to submit your comments by February 23rd, please.
All right, well, thank you. We can leave the line open for a bit longer, but just a reminder, this meeting here was recorded. It will be posted online here in the next few days or so, as soon as we can get it online. The website that we provided, the QR code to the website, they also has information about the upcoming in-person public meeting. It's the same presentation roughly as this one, but if you'd like to also attend in person, it's this Saturday from 9 to 11 a.m. at the Veneta Community Center. And we also have on our website information on how to go ahead and submit those comments. All that information we provided again, but if you're looking for it, the website's a good place to start. So, but I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and providing your input and questions. Thank you so much.